Hello, I'm Robert, and I'm for fact checker and science blogger and helping people scared of various things for our Facebook group Doomsday Debunked. And this time it's about the stories that you get sometimes saying we're in the middle of a mass extinction. No, we're not. We are at the start of a mass extinction. There's a very important distinction between those two things. And so we'll get into that in a bit. So first of all, I just want to say that human beings, we are not at any risk of extinction at all. And the Extinction Rebellion is just, it's not true. Our numbers are increasing, and we can live almost anywhere, grassland, artificial places of course, even in space, even at the bottom of the sea, we can find a way of living there. And we've got forests, shrubland, desert, rocky areas, savanna, and in fact traditionally, if you wanted to go back, say, 10,000 years or something, and you want to find a human being, then probably the best place to find them would be along the seashore, where they used to eat shellfish. But even our technology is very robust. Things like the internet, things like the electricity grids, our knowledge, almost universal literacy, all the books in the libraries. And so we're a very, very robust species. So there could be some other planet where you have intelligent tropical rainforest frogs that could only survive in a tiny, tiny little habitat. And but we're not like that. We are a very, very robust and versatile creature that can survive almost anywhere. So no, we're not at any risk of extinction. But then let's look at some of the others. Species that we share a planet with. Of course, some of the other planets are species are more vulnerable. So, I mean, here for instance, then that's a giant panda, but that was previously listed endangered, it's now down listed as vulnerable. So, this is a much lower level of risk. We don't really face a future with them becoming extinct. And then the humpback whale, so, and they're in zoos in China, bouncing around, lots of little baby giant pandas. They're quite hard to do, but they've figured out how to do it and keep them in captivity, and then they still got them in the wild. There's the humpback whale, and that is well on the road to recovery. That's gone all the way to least concern. And so now I just want to look at this. This is a quite central thing that will help you understand what is meant by a mass extinction and us being at the start of it. So, if you look at the amphibians, then they are amongst the ones that are most species of amphibians are going extinct compared to other kinds of creatures. And just to explain how this diagram works, then this is the time in years that would take with natural extinctions to get the same number as went extinct in 114 years. I think that's from 1900 through to 2014. So we take 10,000 years of amphibian extinctions to match what happened in that 1 century. 6,000 years of fish and mammals, and for birds under 4,000 years, and then that's the conservative. These are very conservative estimates. So, so if you think about that, now I can explain about how it's just the start of a mass extinction. So, 10,000 years of amphibian extinction seems quite a lot. But now, if you do all of that to happen in a century, but now imagine you're looking at the fossil record, say 10 million years ago. Then you won't be able to sample all the habitats where some little species of frog was living. And it could easily have survived in one place for 100,000 years after it's gone extinct everywhere else. So you just don't have the resolution to be able to pick up something like this. This 1 century of extinctions, you just wouldn't see it if it was 10 million years ago. There'd be no way of knowing that this has happened. You just look at the fossil record, and if you look at the actual numbers of species that there were, even for those most vulnerable ones, then you look, for instance, at the amphibians, then 6,414, of which 146 went extinct since 1900. Then again, you just wouldn't notice. In fact, you're unlikely that you would have examples of all 6,400 amphibians, not the easiest of creatures to fossilize. So that's the sense, and yet I'm not saying at all that it's okay to lose. I'm not saying that's okay. It's not okay to lose 146. It's not okay to lose as many in a century as you normally lose in 10,000 years. That's not okay. But it's not a mass extinction, not like a dinosaur one. It would have to go on for centuries, thousands of years. 1,000 years of that would eventually, like 146 a century, 1,000 years would be 1,460. And you're still only getting a fraction of the 6,400 total. So it's just the very start of a mass extinction at the rate that we're going so far. But that's not at all to say it's okay to lose them. Here is an example, the gastric-brooding frog. I'm using Wikipedia, it's usually okay on these sorts of things, and this, many things it's not, just to show you a picture of it and just get a rough idea. So it's the two species of these frogs, and the only known frog species that incubate the tadpoles in the stomach. And that's quite an extraordinary thing. The mother gastric-brooding frog is able to turn its stomach into a kind of little habitat for baby tadpoles without digesting them. And that's the wonder of our world, and it no longer exists. Very sadly, they've gone extinct. And we can never study how it is beyond what they managed to do in the 1980s. We can't use modern science to study and figure out how this frog managed to brood tadpoles in its stomach. So, it's extraordinary wonder of nature that has just been lost. And so that's very sad. And so I'm not saying that this is okay, but just to understand what it actually means. It doesn't mean a world without amphibians. It does mean a world without gastric-brooding frogs, which has already happened. So, and this is another one that we nearly lost, but they saved it. It's saved, probably extinct in the wild because of this fungus disease. But if you want to worry about that fungus disease, then it's all over now pretty much. Mostly it happened in the 1980s, and before it was identified. And some 12% of these species are recovering, others are not yet started to bounce back, and some are still declining, and some areas which hasn't reached yet, but we're not at the height of that anymore. So that's explain that. And this is to show how, just to explain this, so it's rather confusing the way they do it, that they talk about these are critically endangered, these are endangered, these are vulnerable, and all of those together are called threatened. So threatened is quite a weak term, and people often confuse that with endangered, which means it's quite a bit endangered. And so if you look, for instance, look at birds, then it's only a tiny amount that's actually endangered, and most of is threatened, which includes of the ones that are threatened are just vulnerable, which means, roughly speaking, it's a 10% chance of a species going extinct by 2100. But it can also mean that it's just a very small population and it's growing rather slowly. It's very small, and it's growing rapidly, but as long as it's very small, like a few thousand, or I can't remember what the figure is, but thousands of species, thousands of them, and it'd be growing, and it still counts as vulnerable, and also a fragmented population. that also counts as vulnerable. So these are not necessarily all ones that are going to go extinct even if we didn't do anything. And then with our conservation efforts, we are actually shifting a lot of them that way. And these green ones are of the least concerned. We are up here, mammals. We're one of these mammals, least concerned with mammals. And so they're just not going to go extinct this century. So that situation now, as you can see, then we're not headed for anything like, in the case of the dinosaurs, entire one of these bars would just be completely gone. You know, like all the conifers gone, something like that. That is not going to, that just can't happen. Even worst case, it just can't happen. We're not headed for a world without birds, or a world without amphibians, or a world without conifers. But we do risk the species rate increasing, the rate of extinction increasing, but we are also doing an awful lot to conserve species. And so, don't know if I mentioned yet, so the giant panda, which is now previously endangered, is now just vulnerable. And the humpback whale, it's all the way to least concern now. The world will definitely have humpback whales 2100, and really you can't see them going extinct. They're too iconic. China going to put an awful lot of effort, and they've got them breeding in captivity, and lots of maybe you've seen some of the videos of baby giant pandas bouncing around in Chinese zoos, and of course they're also still around in the wild as well. So we're not headed for a world without them. And we have a much more diverse world than there was in the past. So where have I got it? Well, I think I have to scroll up for this one, sorry. No, down. I got confused about which way I have to go. So there we are. So I'm just going to show you, this was how the continents were during the time of the dinosaurs. It was basically an entirely tropical world without winter, except maybe snow on the top of the mountains. And we're in a much more diverse world. We've got the entire range from Antarctica, compare our planet with Antarctica all the way to Kalahari Desert, to the dinosaur world, where they just didn't have the equivalent of our Antarctica, or even Greenland, or even I probably didn't even have anything like Iceland, I'm not sure, but a much more much more homogeneous world. And so we're in a world that's got all these different continents, and each has got these independently evolved groups of creatures. So we start off with a very biodiverse world, and we are the survivors from the dinosaur era. They had this great impact winter, and we are the you don't need to think that human beings are always doing bad things to the planet. We are its thinking component. You call it the noosphere, Thea de Chardin's word. So back then there was nothing the dinosaurs could do about the asteroid, and then these little creatures, they evolved into us. They were the survivors. We are survivors, and we are amongst the most versatile creatures there are, as I said right at the beginning. So, but not only that, then we could stop the asteroid. If we had been around at the time of the dinosaurs, then we would have been able to stop the asteroid from hitting Earth. There's no doubt about it. With a bit of warning, and we certainly have had lots of warning. So that's the situation we're in. We are protectors of our planet, and we're also doing lots to conserve it and to help. And we're also creating lots of niches in our planet. I live in the UK, and here we have all sorts of different habitats that were created by human beings. It started off as thick ice, kilometres deep, then it was the grassland of the tundra, then it was forests covering the entire country, and then human beings came along, and we chopped down trees, and we developed agriculture, and now we have all sorts of species that depend on human beings, and like the falcons and the swifts and the pigeons that live in our towns, and then we have all the swifts are a kind of bird, and then we have quarries and the grasslands, the chalkland grasslands, which would have been forests without us, now a unique habitat of chalkland grassland. We have the water meadows, we have coppiced trees that are used for basket making. So all these habitats, they own little creatures in them. They own plants, they own flowers, they own trees, kinds of trees sometimes. They own animals and birds. And that's what that's what humans are able to do. We create all these habitats around the world, and so we're actually making the world more diverse in many ways. And even in Brazil, when they're cutting down the rainforest, they're creating new habitats. And not many people know, but way back at the time of the conquistadors, in large parts of the Amazon rainforest had already been cut down, and they were farmland all along all the big rivers. So it's nothing new to do that, but they have cut down really rather huge areas of it. And so what is important is to bring the Amazon rainforests do matter a lot because they're so very biodiverse, and because they have little patches of creatures that are just there and not in an exhibited forest, and so they're very important for biodiversity. But the thing is that we can actually stop this mass extinction that we're at the start of. It's human caused, and this is the if I could bring up to the press, let's say that was the thing that was last year, and all the newspapers all the media were saying the scientists have said that 1 million species are going to go extinct. That is not at all what they said. They said, let's save 1 million species. This is the way we know how to do it. And they worked out in great political and sociological detail and economic detail how we can do it. So that's so different from the way it was reported. And so this is what we can do. That is the message. That we're at the start of mass extinction, and we can stop it. And that's what the scientists are saying. And those 1 million species, then most of those are things like insects and so on. And it is actually based on, if I go down to this again, that 1 million species was based on this. It's based on that. And they took these species and they extrapolated them to insects and to little creatures in the sea and so on. And then they got this figure of 1 million. Out of what has been assessed is only 27,000. So 27,000 of these kind of big, easy to see things, and then there are hundreds of thousands and millions, and hundreds of thousands of the millions of these insects and so on. And then if you look at the ones that have only 10% of insects have this risk of a 10% risk of extinction by 2100 and the equivalents, and it was based on that, but that still became 500,000 insects. So that's how they got the figure. It doesn't contradict these. It's just an extension of those into things that haven't been into species that haven't been assessed by the IUCN Red List. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the way that they deal with. You sometimes get these stories. This is, for instance, about the red squirrels in the UK. So the red squirrels in the UK, they're a little bit fragmented. We still have some safe population on the Isle of Wight and some in Scotland, pretty good condition. But you hear that they're threatened. That just means there's 10% by but it's not actually even a risk of 10% by 2100. There's no risk of extinction as long as we keep the Isle of Wight population, for instance. That's not going to go extinct. But then it's not even what they don't mention is tend to mention in these stories is that there are all these ones that have the red squirrel is not going to go extinct because it survives a vast area of Europe. And similar with koala bears, and the little populations that really are at risk, that population could be lost. But the koala bears as a whole, they are not at risk of extinction, and they can be reproduced in captivity, but especially in Australia. It's quite hard to do it outside Australia, but there are some captive breeding outside Australia as well, and they're going to gradually, as the climate gets warmer, they may have to move out of their traditional habitats to places that are currently rather wet, and as it dries up, and further south. But they'll still be there in 2100. They don't really risk extinction. So, as I said, they are of great value, like the gastric-brooding frog. So, it's not saying at all that it's okay for these to go extinct. But but what we can do is we can stop this, and that is good. That's great. And we can do it, and we know how to do it. And we are the survivors of dinosaurs, and we are the thinking component of our world, of our planet. So, unlike the dinosaurs, we can actually stop an asteroid, the very asteroid that made the dinosaurs extinct. And that asteroid, of course, is long gone because it hit Earth. But if another big asteroid like that was to hit Earth, the none can do it in the near future, but for instance, there's one 4479 is actually a comet, and there's one that could hit Earth, and we could spend, but it won't, as long as we've got our civilization. There's only a 1 million chance anyway, 1 to 1. It's expected to miss. But just suppose, for an example, that one did actually was at risk of hitting Earth, then we could affect it and stop it. So we are protectors of our planet. And we're descendants of these tiny, tiny creatures. And we've become a thinking component, and we can help protect our planet. Well, that's just about human beings. Yes, just to say, as human beings we can survive. Even on the moon we can grow. So yes, that's the important thing, that we don't risk losing our agricultural plants, peaches, trees, grains, sheep, cows, dogs, cats, goldfish, whatever you think of it. Anything that we can keep in captivity and as pets or as crops or as something to eat, then we can keep that. We can have that right through into the future. So even if it was mass extinction, even if we didn't do anything to stop the destruction of species, those would still be there, and we could have them even on the moon with our technology. So for sure we would have those no matter what, gardens and things, flowers. And so there's such a rather charming movie that came from. And then actually this Chris Thomas, Inheritance of the Earth, it's an interesting book that I suggest you have a read of. How nature is thriving in an age of extinction. And unlike the dinosaurs, our planet is incredibly diverse, all the way from Antarctica with the penguins there, and to the Kalahari Desert, and then different continents, and each continent has its own different species. And human beings, we create all these niches, as I explained, and lots of species that have come to the UK, say, from the continent, and they actually make our ecosystems more diverse. And that's generally what we're doing. We are in a way simulating the clashing of continents, is an example that he gives, like the way continents came together to make those big islands in the past. Well, we are mixing together species in much a similar way, and when you do that, then individual areas become much more biodiverse, and human beings with all the habitats we create. So although sadly we're losing species, locally, in many areas, we're increasing the biodiversity of individual regions. And where is it? I've got this list of ways that the species, although some of them are harmful, many of the species are actually beneficial. Like, for instance, non-native tamaris, nesting sites in California, and non-native plants in California for native butterflies, and the catalysts for restoration, so guava trees in Kenya supporting fruit-eating birds, and which then encourage seed dispersal, leading forest restoration. And then ecosystem engineers, non-native sea squirts, creating three-dimensional matrix for species richness. And then we have, for instance, one giant tortoise substituting for another. This was intentional, they actually introduced it. So we're doing these things, we're actually benefiting sometimes these various ecosystems around the world. I've talked about this in another video, I won't talk about it here. We can feed everyone, especially in Africa, where they've got very inefficient agriculture. What else have I not talked about? I saw 12 conservation success stories, and then here's some 9 success stories in 2018. And you can even do a little bit, you can make a nesting box or a bug hotel, or do a bit of work, conservation work, or beach clearing. We can all do a little bit. Or a farmer decides to preserve hedgerows, and then you have these strips of flower-rich borders we have now. We also have flower-rich strips through the centre of fields, and then insects, they love those. So yeah, so I think I've talked about some of the main things I wanted to talk about here. Yeah, there's various quotes. I might do a bit more work on this at some point, but do have a look at. I'll put a link to this in the description. So, anything I've forgotten to say. Yeah, I think I've said everything. Let's leave the giant panda, and that's a kind of symbol of the World Wildlife Fund, but it's also gives an example of how we're saving species, and we're doing this in so many ways. Many people working on this, and we actually know how to stop the destruction. We need to encourage sustainable agriculture and more efficient agriculture, and we need to stop the perverse subsidies that encourage people to cut down forests and so on. And we need to reduce food waste, which puts huge pressure on the growing, especially grain-fed meat, for instance. And the 20% of that is actually 20% of the land that's set aside for grain-fed meat. And 20% of that is for food that is just wasted and not even eaten. So you need to reduce the food waste, and then that reduces by 20% the amount of land, if you could stop all that food waste for the meat. And then food waste for other plants, all food waste is getting rid of it makes a big difference to these creatures that we share our planet with. And eating a bit less meat does help, and if by 2050 we could reduce the amount of meat that we eat by a fifth, then that would be very beneficial for the world, according to the science, the experts. So that's like one meat-free meal a week for someone who eats it regularly. It's just something to think about. these sort of situation, and the food waste and as living in a more sustainable way, a more sustainable planet. And these are all stories. And then refrigerated lorries to reduce food waste. There's all these things like that. I've talked about that before, I think, in another video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and it gives you some more hope for the future. And that we're not in the middle of a mass extinction. We're just at the start. We would not even notice this in the species record if this was, say, 10 million years ago. And we have the opportunity to stop it now, and we can do it. Anyway, I do hope I'll put a link to the Doomsday Debunked in the description of this video, so if you're interested, if you're scared of things, do come and join our group and maybe help us with the debunking, or help the scared people, or come here because you're scared and you want some story want some help with some story that scares you. And do check the rules at the head of the group before you take part, because it makes a big difference. And do join and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this.